I've been asked to point out that there is an exit here to the left, there is an exit where you came in, and there are two restrooms that are on the wall to the right. Can you all hear me? Good evening, and welcome to the People's Town Hall. Unfortunately, our legislators, Senator Tillis, Budd, and Congressman Murphy, are unable to join us tonight. I know, big disappointment. I am Kate Blakefield. I'm president of Craven County Democratic Women. This event was brought to you by the North Carolina Democratic Party, the Craven County Democratic Party, and our co-sponsors, the nonpartisan groups, Craven County Progressives and Pamlico Progressives. Linda Moore, would you please stand? Linda is the chair of the Craven County Democrats. Penny, I don't know where Penny is. She's been checking people in. Penny, are you around? Penny. Penny founded the Craven County Progressives. Yeah. And Diane Lemieux is standing next to Penny. And Diane is the leader of the Pamlico Progressives. We could not have had this evening happen without the help and expertise of Stephanie Jones. Stephanie Jones is already standing. Stephanie is the outgoing chair of the worship committee here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. She's the leader of the audiovisuals, and she's an all-around Renaissance woman. We are very grateful to Stephanie and to the fellowship for the use of this space. With us tonight, we are honored to have the DNC Vice Chair, Raina Walters Morgan, North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Anita Earls, and North Carolina Democratic Chair Anderson Clayton. Welcome. They will be answering your questions. Our MC tonight will be Ryan Ewing, the former chair of Craven County Democrats. So Ryan is going to take over with the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. This is lovely. So, former chair, that's a very ceremonial position. And so I get to do the ceremonial pieces. I won't be doing much here. You're going to hear from these lovely panelists this evening. And I'd love to give them each 2 minutes to sort of introduce themselves before we go into the audience questions. Now, the audience questions have been written on index cards, which I have in my coat pocket here. I'll do the best that I can to field your question or to ask you to come to this one microphone up here to ask your question. I have about a dozen of these cards. We may get more. And part of the job here, if you don't have your question pulled, it's because it was very similar to another question and we're trying to consolidate those ideas. We're here for a good time, so let's turn it over. Justice Earls, would you like to, you have a microphone, everybody? Let's make sure those work, first of all.
Yes, I have a microphone.
Okay, great. So why don't you?
Awesome.
Please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here. I did actually have a longer speech, but I'm going to keep it to 2 minutes. I serve you as now the Senior Associate Justice on the North Carolina Supreme Court. Thank you. And the first and most important thing that I want you to know about our court is that last Tuesday, I got to swear in Justice Allison Riggs. And I got to do that. I got to do that because of the work of many people like you in this room, or maybe some of you. And that work was protecting our democracy. After the initial counts, she was ahead by only 734 votes. And what we know is that some 900 votes were cured by people like you working as volunteers, letting voters know who came to cast a ballot and either they didn't have their ID or there was something else they needed to correct, so they had to go back to the polling place after the election. And because people did that work to get those voters to be able to make their votes count, that's why she was ahead to begin with. But I also want you to know that our work isn't done. When the court ruled, I'm happy to talk about the case more if people have questions, but both the federal court and the state court made clear that while you can't change the rules of the election after the election because you lost, you can change it prospectively. And so there's estimates that some 400,000 registered voters in North Carolina don't have the last four of their social security number or their driver's license in their voter registration. So I'm working really hard to make sure that voters' registrations are up to date so that they can cast a ballot in 2026, because I will be on your ballot in 2026. And so if you haven't looked at the Griffin list, that's a place to start, thegryphonlist.com. Check if you know anyone on that list, because trusted messengers are the best way to get the word. If you have a neighbor or a relative or friend, someone whose name you see on that list, and you call them up and let them know, hey, did you know you need to get your registration corrected so that you can vote in municipals this year, in the midterms next year? That's really valuable work. And finally, let me just make clear what our court does, because I think people may not understand. You know, you probably won't have a case argued in front of our Supreme Court, but we make decisions all the time that affect everything from how much you pay for your electricity, whether or not you'll get fairly compensated if you're injured on the job, if you're uninsured, what you have to pay when you go to the emergency room, whether or not our public school system will offer every child a sound basic education, and whether or not your vote will count fairly. So it's a really important role, and we have a plan to take back our courts by 2028 so that you have a court. So that you have a court that believes in the right to a sound basic education, a court that's willing to enforce your rights so that there's no longer extreme partisan gerrymandering, a court that understands and appreciates the lives of ordinary North Carolinians across the state. That's what our goal is, and that's what I'm working so hard to achieve. I'm so grateful to each one of you for being here tonight, and I'm looking forward to trying to answer your questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Justice Earls. And so next up, Anderson Clayton. And thank you for standing, please. Yeah, thank you. We want to make sure Zoom can see you and make sure that mic is working. If not, come up to the side.
I shall. Hey, Craven County, thank you all so much for being out here with us tonight. I really, really appreciate it. My name is Anderson Clayton. I've got the honor and the privilege of serving as your state party chair. I might have her going in and out a little bit. Okay. But I appreciate seeing so many faces. I know that y'all could be anywhere else tonight. Choosing to be here, building community, and also getting your questions answered is some of the most important work that we could be doing right now as folks that are here to try to answer and give that feedback to you all. I wanted to give a very big shout out. We've got Charles Dudley in the house with us here tonight, everybody, who ran for year. Filled one of our seats for us last year. Linda Moore also ran for us last year as one of our candidates. It is never easy to step up and run for office. And we've got Chris Schulte in the house with us here tonight, everybody, who is also stepping up to run for Greg Murphy's seat in CD3, because as you all know, we unfortunately do not have Republicans that are willing to show up right now and represent their constituents in Congress. They are too busy selling out to corporations and to folks in Washington, D.C. that would rather pad their pockets than actually come down here and face constituents that are going to lose their SNAP benefits or their health care access. And honestly, we've got a United States Senator, quite frankly, in Thom Tillis, who's doing the same thing. We've seen what happens when Thom Tillis stands up and stands by his word. Donald Trump steps back and relents, quite frankly. And we saw that with the Washington federal prosecutor. We saw that when Thom Tillis did not do that, though, and when he appointed Pete Hegseth to our Department of Defense, when we saw Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. also be appointed, someone that does not care about North Carolinians and making us poorer and sicker instead of helping our state grow and become what we all know it can be, a new South, a better South for everybody to live and stay in and not have to leave. We have that opportunity. Justice Earls has done an incredible job. Justice Riggs has done an incredible job of helping us make sure that we prioritize our court races going into 2026. Because to Justice Earls' point, we do have a plan to fight back against Republican gerrymandering that has made our state so hard to operate in, especially at the state legislative level. We don't have people right now picking their representatives. We've got their representatives picking the people and picking their districts and drawing it for them right now. And we have the opportunity as North Carolinians to hold them accountable. We did it this last election cycle. Even though we saw the country fall to a red wave, North Carolina Democrats were able to do something different. We were the only state in the country that flipped 2 statewide races from red to blue, our superintendent race and our lieutenant governor's office. And if you all remember the threat to public education that existed with Michelle Morrow last year, getting Mo Green into that office to help defend against and make sure that our public schools are protected right now, we need more of our investment in our public schools, and we know right now the legislature is hell-bent on defunding our public schools in every way, shape, and form. So to my teachers in the crowd here tonight, thank you for the work that you all do each and every day to help teach our young people and try to give folks a better opportunity, especially in rural North Carolina. You all are also, though, about to hear from our fantastic DNC Vice Chair who just got elected back in February. We are so excited to have her here with us tonight, everybody. Raina has been a true advocate for North Carolina at the national level, and we're excited to have one of our own in Washington, D.C. right now, too, putting the emphasis on the South, because we know that North Carolina has a lot of power. If North Carolina had not been gerrymandered in 2022 or 2023 after we lost our courts in 2022, Hakeem Jeffries would be Speaker of the House right now. And we need to understand, and people everywhere need to understand, that the power of this party runs right through where you're sitting right now in this state, okay? So I believe that, I know that, and I'm very excited for y'all to hear from Raina Walters Morgan next up, everybody.
Let me tell you, Anderson is one of the most dynamic state party chairs in the country, and I'm so glad that we have her here. And I think Anderson represents what has been missing in this party, and that is youth, exuberance, energy. And she is a testament that when you put young people up, that we can win. Anderson has done the hard work. She goes to places that people don't want to go, and she makes the case for not just people in that place, but everywhere across the state. So thank you, Anderson, for all of the work that you do. I'm Raina Walters Morgan. I am the Vice Chair for Civic Engagement and Voter Participation at the Democratic National Committee. Thank you. Thank you. And what that means is that I am the person who is here to listen and to take the messages, the thoughts, the concerns that for far too long have not been translated up into leadership and the action that we see happen at the national level. I have talked to so many people in North Carolina, across this country, who have said to me, Democrats haven't shown up. You showed up too little, too late. And you can't just show up when you need something right before an election and think that it's going to make a difference. And part of the reason I ran for this position was because I was tired of seeing the same old thing. I was tired of seeing these same old trends. And I committed to the people that voted for me. I'm committed to every Democrat and every person in this room that we're going to show up. And we're going to do things differently, because you can't expect to not organize all year and to have a difference in the results. We know that when we organize, we win. We know that when we show up, people trust us, because if people don't see you in their communities, they won't vote for you. If they don't vote for you, then you can't enact the policies that are going to make a difference for us to make our lives better. And you end up people like Donald Trump in office. That's where we got to a point where people believed the lies that he was saying, and they knew they were lies. But because we missed the mark on things, we missed some opportunities, and I'm committed to changing that. So my portfolio includes voter participation, it includes civic engagement, and it also includes voter protection. And that involves ensuring that every eligible voter can cast a ballot that counts. Because all of your organizing won't make a difference if we can't make sure that we get our people elected. I'm so happy to be here. I'm happy to listen. And what I am going to do is take all of the things that I hear from you and make sure that leadership at the national level does hear those things, and that we do enact the changes that need to be enacted And so when campaigns come knocking in a few years, that the concerns on the ground, they at least are aware of them, and that's what I'm doing. So thank you for having us here. I'm ready for the questions.
Thank you. Very much. And so the first question, I don't have it written out here, but Georgianne McKinnon, if you are present, Georgianne McKinnon. Okay, come on up to this microphone. This is the only audience mic that we have, but it's right here on this mic stand next to the lovely Charles Dudley. And please share your question, and if it's directed to any particular panelists, let us know that as well.
Alrighty. Well, my questions are directed to Senators Bud Tillis and Congressman Murphy. And unfortunately, they're not here to hear my concerns, but I'm going to tell them anyway. So I'm here tonight because I love my country and I believe in the Constitution. Today, I fear the country is in peril, fueled by a would-be dictator and his MAGA minions. America is becoming unrecognizable. I, like many others, have worked hard to preserve our freedoms and protect our rights. Now more than ever, we depend on our elected officials, both Democrat and Republicans, to adhere to the Constitution and stand up to those who would violate it. Therefore, I specifically ask, where do you stand and what will you do to maintain and defend our democracy and our way of life?
In the absence of these three elected officials, would anyone like to field that question? Thank you.
Can I field the question? So I want to make clear that what our court did in 2022 to protect our democracy, and I do think that it is one of the most fundamental things we can talk about and do. So in 2022, the democratically controlled court, it was 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans, issued an opinion saying that extreme partisan gerrymandering violates the state constitution. And you'll remember prior to that, in a case from North Carolina, the US Supreme Court said, we are not going to touch redistricting, we're going to leave it to the states. So then there was a trial, experts testified, 2 weeks of hearing, a trial judge found, a 3-judge panel found that our congressional districts and our state House and state Senate districts were extreme partisan gerrymanders. Our court said, here are 3 tests you can use. This is not a we know it when we see it. There's actually political science valid measures. And we said, it doesn't matter who does it, Republicans, Democrats, extreme gerrymandering violates the rights of voters in this state to have their vote count equally. And then in 2023, the new court took power, 5 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and one of the very first things they did was say, we're going to rehear that case. And understand that that's something that has not happened in the over 200-year history of our court. Because when you decide a case and you issue a final opinion, it's supposed to be final. That is part of the rule of law. That is part of the concept of equal justice under the law. So the new court came in and said, we're going to rehear this. And they didn't say, oh, you're mistaken, these are not gerrymanders. They said, we acknowledge they're gerrymanders. We just think that we as a court have no power to do anything about it. And so that's why I say when you hear, I have an opponent now. Sarah Stevens has filed a run against me. She's a 17-year Republican legislature in the General Assembly. When I hear her say I'm a constitutional conservative, what I understand that to mean is that she will violate the Constitution if it's in conflict with her conservative values. So the new court said it's fine to gerrymander. But in addition to having districts that fairly reflect the weight of votes that how people perform, and remember that in our electorate, it's about a third, a third, and a third. So there's a third of people who register as unaffiliated. But we know their voting patterns. But when you have these extremely gerrymandered districts, I think they also feel left out. And so one thing I hope you can use as you're going around and talking to people about how we save our democracy is to say that we need to have a court that has balance. And if independent voters are concerned about, they don't want to identify one place or the other, then at least they should stand up for the concept of balance. And the only way to have balance in our legislature is to have a court that's willing to enforce the state constitution. And right now, the only way to have balance on our state courts is in 2026 to keep one of the two Democrats that are there. And let me just for a minute also tell you about the Court of Appeals. That's a 15-member court. Right now, there are 3 Democrats out of the 15. And all 3 will be on your ballot in 2026. So if we're going to, and they're statewide, so everybody gets to vote for them. If we're going to have balance on our state courts, and the federal government is making everything about states now, right? They're saying redistricting, that's about the states. They're saying education, that's for the states. Then we need to have a state court that is balanced. So I would say that what I will do to protect our democracy is to continue to fight for the principles that the prior court put in place, principles that say every vote should count and count equally. Thank you.
And you want to go ahead?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I want to discuss some of that from a national perspective as well. For those who don't know me, my background was serving as the DNC's voter protection director for almost 5 years. And we have been dealing with this administration's lawlessness since Trump refused to accept the election results after 2020. There are a lot of things that we can do at the national level that will never replace what's happening at the state level. But what we try to do is supplement some of that work and support the work that's happening here. So, for example, one of the things that we've pushed is having voter protection programs in as many states as we can, because what we understand is that when you have people on the ground who are voter protection professionals, we have an amazing voter protection director at NCDP. They can help translate what's happening from the legal perspective and translate that into effective strategies for organizers, but also help make sure that we have voter education programming available as well. So having that staff on the ground, having them there early to advocate for positive changes, help organize in the communities makes a huge difference. The other thing that we're doing is filing lawsuits at the federal level as well. The DNC has challenged several of the Trump administration's lawless executive orders. He has been issuing these executive orders to try and make up for the fact that policy-wise, they're not advancing anything legally. They're trying to put these meaningless words on pieces of paper to try and advance policy. So one of the things that they did was try to issue an election integrity executive order. There was nothing that was that had integrity about that election, about that executive order. Nothing at all. But what it would have done was make it harder for women who have been married, who've changed their last names to vote. It would have made it harder for people of color to vote. And the DNC, along with sister committees, filed a lawsuit. And we got parts of that executive order blocked. And we've got to keep doing that. We're not going to be successful in everything, but we've got to challenge as many of those things that we can. And that's one of the things that the DNC is committed to doing, fighting with our sister committees, fighting with our states, and filing those lawsuits, and also the organizing piece, because I don't think that we can do just one aspect. It's got to be a holistic approach that includes the law, it includes organizing, advocacy, and education.
So our next question comes from Clifford Russ Burt. Russ, are you there? Okay. Come on up. He's got a question for us, and I have it typed out 2 ways. Do you have it by memory, or you want this back?
Sure. Hi, I'm Russ.
You can tilt that down if it's, there you go.
They're always too high for me. Okay, so we've all known about Project 2025 for some time now. It's a blueprint to consolidate power, dismantle public protections, and rob the poor to pay the rich, among many other things. We're now beginning to see some of the disastrous consequences of this document, even when we've had a little time to plan our resistance to it, which we're currently working. Just last month, Senator Bernie Sanders said that the solutions we need won't come from Washington. They'll come from local governments driven by regular people stepping up to lead, and I believe he's right. As we head into the primaries, the midterms, and 2028, and if Senator Sanders is correct in his assertion, how is the Democratic Party aligning its national strategy to support and amplify regular people like myself running for local government? And beyond that, do we have an anti-2025 anti-Project 2025 program that isn't simply reactive and more proactive towards this.
So if you want to run for office locally in 2025, I think that everybody should, because if you see the representatives that we have right now in Congress, I hope that each and every one of you feels capable enough to run for office at this moment in time. You should, by any circumstance. If you are living, breathing, and existing on this earth right now, you could probably do better than some of our folks in Washington, D.C. But I also think you could probably do some better than some of the folks in your courthouse or in your school board or in your local city council. And the thing that I challenge people a lot is, can you tell me the 5 people that sit on your city council or your county commission right now? A lot of our party's problem is the fact that we have focused too much on nationalizing our politics versus looking to the ground. And that's something this year that we really want to be able to focus on as a state party. And so one of the things that we are really excited to offer is free vote builder access, which is our data source to any of our local candidates that are going to be running. We've got website support that we can give at the local level. So our digital team, we've got 4 people that are ready to help create a website for you for free, and then also be able to help do any sort of website or logo creation for you for free as well, because I think that sometimes those are the things that really inhibit people from being able to run. I know that our local county parties are trying to also be able to support candidates in certain ways this year with different funding resources if they can, but I also know that it's a stretch a lot of times for our county parties to be able to find those resources. And so if you're somebody that has those resources in this room here tonight too, I know my Craven County Democrats would always appreciate a donation. But the other side of that that I think is really important is the field capacity that we're going to be able to provide to this year. We've got 6 organizers in the state party right now with our organizing team. It's the first time North Carolina Dems have had an organizing team in an off cycle, which I think is really important too. All of the folks that are here are from the communities that they're operating in. And so we've got Bishop O'Neill, who's out of Cumberland County, that takes the southeast. We've got folks in the western part of the state in the Piedmont. Daniel Franch really works out of Johnston County for us right now. But it is trying to make sure that we have a year-round organizing presence. And I also would be remiss if I did not thank any of my volunteers that knocked doors this last election cycle. A lot of the work that this party does is because we do have volunteers that do it and that put the work in and help us out with it. And so something that I want us to get smarter about, because I think we all need to be realistic about the fact that right now North Carolina at the local level is not set up to run working class people for office either, right? $13,000 is how much a state legislator makes right now in our state legislature. Where, you know, when you think about the type of folks that are able to run for office, it is typically people that have some sort of independent wealth, or they're a lawyer, or they're a doctor, or somebody that has the ability to be flexible with their work schedule. And that is not the typical folks right now that are going to lose their SNAP benefits, or that are not going to have their health care access of what's happening in Washington, D.C. And so I think that the other aspect of that is making sure that more people know that exists, right? Not many, I think a lot of folks dream and they think about politicians and they're like, oh, they're people that make a lot of money. And I'm like, no, actually, it's really not. And that's part of the inhibiting aspect of working people being able to run for those positions, is because they're not paid to do it originally to begin with. And so something else, and that a structural change that we have got to figure out how to do in the future. But I think that is also when you have a more progressive legislature that also comes from taking back our courts too at the end of the day. But that is, I think, a lot of that question, I'm hoping. I think I forgot the first part of it. Project 2025. Okay, thank you, Justice Earls. Because the other thing I would say, and I'll be honest with y'all, a lot of people are concerned about what's happening in Congress right now. You know, the defunding of public education, the aspect of healthcare being stripped away from folks. And I just want to look at people and say, it's been happening in North Carolina the last 15 years. And I think that we all have to get realistic about the fact that it's been happening in a lot of our states for the last decade or two, that our party has divested from areas instead of working on a 50-state strategy. And I know that that's probably a little bit of what Raina can touch on for this point too. But it is important, I think, for us to realize that we do have to change our messaging. We are going to have to understand how to mobilize people in a way that's different right now than what we've been doing previously. And we've got to bring politics more to people. And I think that's part of why we're trying to do this, is the education, right? News deserts that exist right now. You know, the Democratic Party doesn't have a Fox News or a Sinclair media that's going to be able to help us push that out. And folks would say that, you know, 40 years ago when Democrats were busy buying television ads, Republicans were buying television stations. And that is true in so many cases, right? And the fact is that Democrats do have a message. We're the party of raising wages. We're the party of unions. We're the party of health access and making sure that each person deserves to be able to work 40 hours a week and have a job and a roof over your head and not have to worry about paying your bills at the end of the day. But I'm like, how we get that message out to people is pretty freaking hard right now, to be honest with you. And also, Republicans have built up an ecosystem that works for them to do that with. And they didn't do that over 4 years. They kept coming back to the table. Every time they lost, Republicans kept coming back. And we have to do that same thing. Democrats, unaffiliateds, I like to say Dems and friends because I'm like, I know that not everybody's going to agree with me on everything right now. And I'm like, that's great. As long as you agree with the fact that they're not doing their jobs right now, we do agree on something. And we can build on that, I think. But Raina, do you want to take the 56 strategy part of that?
Yes, yes, yes. So one of the things that we know is that when you don't show up, you can't win. That's the most basic fundamental piece of all of this. And so the new leadership at the DNC, we have a fantastic new chair, Ken Martin. He really campaigned on organizing everywhere. Because for far too long, we've ceded ground. We've assumed like, well, this isn't a red area, so we shouldn't even bother. Or rural voters are not our voters. And when you don't try, then you're not going to be successful. Everyone wants to be the next Georgia. But what people don't realize is they put 10 years in to get to the point where they started winning. It is not something that happens overnight. It's something that takes an investment, a consistent investment, day in, day out. Even when things don't look like they're going your way, you have to keep showing up. And that's why Ken Martin announced his program called Organizing Everywhere. And the premise of that is we are going to organize everywhere. We're not going to cede ground. We're going to show up in the places where Democrats haven't knocked a door in 10 years. But we can't do that alone. We can't do that at the national level. It takes investing in state parties. And another thing that they recently did, which is probably a little more nuanced than maybe what you want to know, but they also increased the amount of funding that went to state parties. And that makes a difference in terms of what state parties are able to do. The fact that, free vote builder, like that's something that Anderson was already doing, but imagine what that could do for another state party that doesn't have the resources that we have here. And so things like that, investing in state parties, investing in people. The DNC, contrary to what some people might think, does not endorse some primaries. But what we do is whenever there is a nominee, we come in with support however we can support. And not all of that is always financial support. Sometimes it's digital. Sometimes it's being able to send some email. Sometimes it's deploying people. But we're committed to doing that. And when you have a mindset of establishing a 57 state party and territory strategy, you can start to make a difference there. Again, it's not going to be overnight, but when you start to invest and you start to show up in places, then you can eventually make a difference. And that's what Ken Martin campaigned on. I campaigned on that. We did that in the voter protection space. As you can tell, that is the area that I am a little bit of an expert in. When I started the DNC in 2019, we only had 14 states using our technology tools. When I left, it was 44. And the DNC is able to provide a lot of these tools for free to states. Things like LBJ, it's called Lawyers Bound for Justice. It is the tool that we use to track election incidents across the country. That is a tool that we can provide for free, but people have to know how to use it. So we have to train people how to use it. And so providing tech tools, providing resources are things that we can do. Again, not all of it will be in the financial mechanism that everyone may need, but we can start to make some strides and we can start to make some investments and show up in ways that will be helpful and impactful.
Our next question comes from Dr. Ann Healy. Dr. Healy, come on up. Right here, next to the handsome Charles Dudley.
I'm directing the questions also to the elected officials. I am a retired physician here in North Carolina. And about 30 years ago, one of my good friends had a baby boy who was born with CPS1 deficiency, which at the time was fatal, and her child died. It was a tragedy. It was horrible. Last week, KJ Muldoon was another baby boy born with CPS1 deficiency, and he benefited from the CRISPR gene editing therapy and is going to live. It's not a cure, but it's so exciting for this family and these people that this child has benefited from the medical research that has been, that we have had over the past few years, like the medical research that we have at UNC, Wake Forest, Duke, ECU, and now Campbell Universities. Now, unfortunately, under the current administration, the medical funding for these for the medical research at these places has been drastically cut, reduced, and it was done all at once. And these places are scrambling. The studies were cut. People were enrolled in these studies. They're not getting them anymore. So this affected not just the doctors, but all the people. It filtered down to the employees in the cafeteria, in the maintenance departments, and to patient care. So this has been a horrible injustice done to our medical facilities. It also has affected the economy of North Carolina. So my question for our elected officials is, how do you propose to support these institutions to continue to do the research that benefits us all?
They're not here to answer that question. Would anyone care to take a stab at that?
I'm just gonna say I'm gonna give you a positive spin to that because I don't know how to say otherwise that, obviously people are going to be hurt from the fact that Republicans are trying to cut government spending, especially when you look at the fact that, again, RFK Jr. exists right now as one of our cabinet picks. And that is something that when you're looking at, again, why this United States Senate fight in 2026 is going to be so important, it is because that can be directly attached to Thom Tillis. If Thom Tillis had stepped up and stood by his word and saying he would not appoint him, Donald Trump would have appointed somebody else. And we saw that happen, right? But I also think that y'all need to understand what you did last November. Because I do think that right now folks are saying, well, I'm tired of hearing about elections. And I'm like, well, elections are what got us into this mess. Elections are also what's going to get us out of it. Jeff Jackson, being our attorney general right now, is one of the best. He is the only, not even Virginia, right, has got a Democrat sitting in that office right now. He is the only Democratic attorney general in the South. And it was important for North Carolina to maintain that seat last election because of the fact that he has been the #1 sole defender of North Carolinians losing access to NIH funding. North Carolina would have lost $1 billion of funding had Jeff Jackson not been our attorney general and signed on to a federal lawsuit with 23 other attorneys general from across the country. And federal judges would tell you right now, unless you are a state with a Democratic attorney general that is filed onto those lawsuits, you are being stripped of that funding and your state is losing. And that does not mean that some of these grants did not get caught up in that executive order, that people have still lost their jobs, the uncertainty of that, right? You had freezes in the funding for a week. You had people and universities that said, we can't offer scholarships. We don't know that we can continue with some of this. But also North Carolina was saved. A Democrat came in and saved a Republican's ass. I mean, like, ooh, not so normal, right, in that sense. But it is true. And Jeff Jackson being the one that was also one of the first attorney generals to defend and to step up and sue against Donald Trump's executive order unconstitutionally against birthright citizenship, right? Federal funding that was going to be stripped away from Western North Carolina, right? SNAP beneficiaries. One of the first executive orders he did, the first executive order he did, was trying to strip federal funding away from Western North Carolina Relief and SNAP beneficiaries and nonprofits across the state right now. 2.9 people in North Carolina rely on SNAP benefits, y'all. We're talking about a third of our population, and we got 11 million people in the state, and I'm sitting there going, what are they going to eat? You know, I mean, we have an obligation to help people understand that these are real people that are going to be impacted and that there are Democrats that are helping defend against that right now for them. But that's important for folks to understand and be educated on because a lot of people are not understanding that right now too, right? And I know that Justice Earls probably has thoughts on this as well.
Right. No, thank you for that question. Because I think it is so important that we do understand the personal stories behind what's happening. And so bringing forward people that you see being impacted and and I want to make sure that none of you underestimate the power that each one of you has as an influencer, okay? And by that I mean you belong to a number of networks, whether it's a club you're engaged in, an activity you do, your church, professional associations, you all have various networks of people that you can communicate with. And whether you send a mass email repeating the question you just gave us, or any other way that you can get the word out to let more people know what's actually happening, I think the easier it will be to build the momentum to stop it. I will say last week I talked to a Duke doctor who does research and was telling me that, he says, you will not even believe the number of people from Duke that are losing their jobs now because of this. And as you say, it's not just the doctors and researchers, it's all the people who support their work in so many ways. And so the only other, so I'm also a big fan of in addition to shedding a light on what's going on, also doing whatever we can where we are. And so I do think that asking the state to step up to the plate in some ways might possibly work, or could be an avenue. But I do, as long as this is a question about healthcare, let me just give one example about my opponent, who last week, or perhaps the week before last, the General Assembly was debating a bill that would require health insurance companies to pay the same for varying levels of mammogram screening. Right now, initial screening is paid, everyone can afford that, but if you need more advanced screening, it's a higher cost. And my opponent stood on the floor of the House, stood on the floor of the House and said, we can't pass this bill because it will be too hard on insurance companies. And the most striking thing is that this is a woman who is herself a breast cancer survivor. The end of that story is that Republicans in the House started actually support. Normally, she's a high-ranking member of the House, a lot of seniority, and normally her opposition would kill a bill. But other Republicans stood up and said, wait a minute, this is important. And in fact, a male member of the legislature stood up and said he had breast cancer. And he understood why this advanced screening, why everyone needed to be able to afford it. So then the bill passed and she changed her vote. But my point is, you can hold your elected officials accountable at multiple levels of government, and making up for what's happening to the medical research is so vitally important to all of our health. And perhaps we can talk to our state legislators as well.
We need to trade some Sarah Stevens stories after this. The next question comes from Reverend Margaret Pollock, and she has a question. Yes, come on up. Microphone's way over here, next to the. What's the adjective I want to use this time, Charles? Vivacious. Charles Dudley. Right here at the microphone, right back there. All I have is this. That's all they gave me. You want to we can freestyle it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I wrote this out in detail. I want to address our senators and our representative about whether they are alarmed by the affront to due process that the Trump administration is committing now in sending, oh dear, I'm not going to remember his name. Thank you. By sending him without due process of law to El Salvador, to a terrible, terrible prison. And not only that, but they are not doing what the courts require them to do to bring him back. And Trump is saying, oh, well, I can't really do that. And the president of El Salvador says, well, I don't have anything to do with it. Well, anyway, the point about all this is that what's his name? Thank you. He is not an American citizen, but he is within the jurisdiction of the United States. So he has constitutional protections. Now, what's particularly alarming is, what about somebody who is an American citizen but gets rounded up and sent off without due process? I think the whole thing is at a knife edge. So my question to you, senators and congressmen, are, what do you plan to do about this? Now, Senator Van Hollen has introduced a bill in the Senate to provide senatorial oversight of the administration on matters like this. I'm wondering if the senators would vote in support of this bill, and whether the congressman would put forth something like that in the House. That's my question.
Well, I think we're recording this, so we'll make sure that we send a copy of that over their way, see if they ever answer. But I think Justice Earl should probably, or, oh, Raina, yeah, get up here and yes.
So it is really disheartening when your elected leaders have no respect for the rule of law. And what we have seen in this administration, what we have seen in the Department of Justice, that for some reason Trump thinks are his personal attorneys and the people out to just do whatever he wants instead of protecting the rights of every American and everyone under the jurisdiction of America and everyone who is required to have due process. Instead of doing that, they are really focusing on Trump's agenda and the Project 2025 agenda. It is horrific to see what's happening. It is horrific to know that the people who are at the Department of Justice right now and the White House don't have regard for due process. This is really difficult because it's the fundamental basis of what we're all raised believing, that when you are in America, that the Constitution is the law of the land and that people will abide by that. But I think what we have to understand and know is that we are not in normal times anymore. And we have to all govern ourselves accordingly. We have to make sure that our loved ones know and understand that they need to be prepared. You know, if you are a person who is in the United States and you are here through, you know, a green card. My mom was a green card holder for about 50 years of her, actually about 60 years of her life, and finally got her citizenship because even before Trump came back into power, she had been harassed leaving and coming back into the country. And we have to put our friends on alert that you have to be more aware of what you're doing now. You have to be aware that you might be at risk. You have to be aware that the protections that we all hold dear are just not regarded by this administration. But what we also have to do is stand with each other, because today they're green card holders. Tomorrow they could be potentially US citizens. And this is not to be scary. What this is to do is to say that we all have to stand together, because if something is happening to one person, it's really happening to all of us. Because when you have an administration that has no regard for the law and what the law means, they are looking for opportunities to see what's going to work. And we can't allow that to happen. I'm sorry that this is probably not the answer that you were looking for, but it's a real answer. And that's why we have been filing lawsuits. You know, this is why at the national level, you know, especially at the DNC, you know, we are not the best messengers for every lawsuit, but to the extent that we are seeing executive orders and actions play out, especially those around elections, we are filing lawsuits to try and hold the Trump administration accountable. One of the other things that we're also doing is bringing attention to some of these issues. So we recently at the DNC announced a People's Cabinet. And these are people who are experts, subject matter experts in every area of life, who we want to have people hear from. These are not elected officials. These are experts in various areas of the law and their communities. Because what we also know is that we have to make sure people are aware of what's happening. We can't have another Garcia in the dark. We can't have another instance where people are not aware of what this administration is doing. We have to talk about it. We have to make sure our neighbors know what's happening, but we have to make sure that we relate it to in a way that resonates with them. Maybe they don't relate to what's happening with Garcia, but they might relate to losing their SNAP benefits. They might relate to what's happening in terms of veterans and the disrespect that they're seeing right now. And for those of you who are not able to watch the town hall with Maxwell Frost, he said something that was so profound and that I've been sharing with people. He said that there are a lot of people who are lied to, and they didn't know that they were going to be lied to, or they thought that it wouldn't apply to them. But now is not necessarily the time to say, I told you so. It's time to say, I'm sorry that you were lied to, and welcome. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to be the messengers to tell people about what is happening, why it's so horrible, but also that there is an alternative. We don't have to have this same result at the end of 25, at the end of 26, at the end of 27, at the end of 28. These elections matter. And this is not just about voting for Democrats. This is about voting for people who care about their neighbors on a human level. And yes. And when we have people who are running for office who care about their fellow human being, then that's when we're going to start to make a difference and see a difference. And that's what all of you can do in this room. I know it's hard out here. I know it's hard out here. But there are people who are hurting just like you. And they have regrets about what they're seeing. And we have to make sure that we've got candidates who are reflecting the values that we want to see, and that we're having real conversations with people so that they know that their election and their votes have implications and consequences and repercussions, and that their vote matters for every single election. We cannot take any vote for granted, any election for granted, because it might be immigration one day, it might be something that's more local tomorrow. And all of these Republicans are talking from the same agenda. They're talking from a position of wanting to maintain power, and they don't care how they keep that power. And they will throw their neighbor under the bus to keep that power. And we've got to hold them accountable to that. And so don't let them slide on any election. If it's a school board, hold them accountable. Make sure that the people who are running for that office believe in the value of a public education. If it's district attorney, make sure that they believe in holding people accountable for their actions and not letting people slide just because it's their buddy or because it's their rich friend.
Yeah, I do want to address and to say thank you for caring about the importance of due process and the importance of recognizing everyone's essential humanity. I think we're seeing a pattern here of ignore the Constitution when it doesn't serve your goals. And part of the goal here, I think, is to create scapegoats. For all that pain that we are now in and future going to see is to try to find an identifiable group that we can somehow blame. And for me as a judge, the scary thing is that judges who have tried to stand up for due process and rule of law themselves have been arrested and charged with felonies, right? So the intimidation is real, but what I do know is that means this is a time when we can't be silent. Right? We can't sit back and say, okay, I'm just going to put my head down, get through the next 3 years, everything will be all right. No. There is nothing necessary. There's no pendulum that definitely is necessarily going to swing back. It's only by us coming together, speaking up, speaking out, and standing strong. That's the only way to make a difference. Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie Jones, would you come up? Okay, we're getting a lot of new questions, and I'm not sure, but I'll collate and we'll figure it out. Stephanie, if you're here, come on up. You're in the back. Okay. Lots of good questions here. We're going to have to make this a multi-season episode arc. We'll have to do this every month. Come on up, Stephanie. Thank you.
I have some story to relate. I'll start off with the most important point. I am a transgender woman. When I came out as transgender, I lost access to a gym facility, health facility, simply for asking what accommodations could be made for me. And the contract with the health facility was summarily broken in what I believe is direct violation of its own terms. I have been threatened, not for being in a restroom, but for the possibility of being in a restroom. I have had a friend murdered. And based upon the way her body was violated, it was a hate crime. I've had a friend commit suicide because society made her transition unbearable. She couldn't enjoy what she worked to get. This past election season, the Republican campaign spent $250 million attacking me and mine. I wasn't surprised that they did it, but I was appalled at what kind of things they had to say. I live in this existence. I know everything that they were saying was lies, misinformation, defamatory, vilifying. And their attack attacked millions of people like me in this country. And they framed it as us, as me and people like me being the other. The they, them, and not you. Okay? Well, I will guarantee you that if you prick me, I will bleed. I am not an ideology. I am a human being. I'm going to be a little raw right now. I was a little disappointed that Kamala and Tim's campaign could not voice a defense of me. And then I was even further disappointed that after the campaign, I felt like the bus was put in reverse and backed up over me again, because there was people putting blame on the transgender as being possible cause for the loss, when in fact the only people talking about transgender people were the Republicans. I would ask those three gentlemen if they are in agreement with the way that campaign was run. If they were actually there instead of in effigy, could they look me in the eye and say to me the things that the campaign on the Republican Party side said about me? I don't know that I need an answer to any of this from you tonight. I do know there are answers. I live in this world, and everything they said can be refuted. If you are willing to look into the facts. Over in Great Britain, they have just, in the last year or so, they came out with what's called the Cass report, the Cass review. And as a result of that, the political parties in Great Britain are abandoning trans rights. A similar report has just been put out here by our Health and Human Services that does exactly the same thing. It attacks transgender people with falsehoods and misinformation, and there is not a single trans voice in that report. We need to support trans people. We need to lift up trans voices. There is defense of all the attacks on us, and we need to get that out into the public, and our candidates need to know this information so they can competently stand with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing your story. I don't know if any of the panelists want to address any of the points raised there, but please
mean,
go ahead.
I would just say that anybody that's blaming us losing this election on trans people did not pay attention to what happened last election cycle. And I think that everybody can also agree that our party has a lot of ownership to take over what happened last election cycle. We didn't just lose this election to Donald Trump, we lost it to the couch. We lost it to people not feeling inspired enough by our candidates, not feeling like our party was speaking to the issues that were going on the ground. And until we own our own guilt in that, quite frankly, I don't think that we move forward as a party or a country. And I realize that, to be frank with everybody in this room, Joe Biden should have been a one-term president. We should have had an opportunity for people to come together and decide this election. And I get that. And I know as a state party chair, we have to say that. But I also understand that this election was about the fact that people are not making enough money right now to be able to support the livelihood that they have. And a lot of people were looking inwardly. And the fact is that Donald Trump also lost as an incumbent president in 2020. Like, we saw a change, and what we're seeing right now federally and both internationally, right? Because this is not just, I don't think that you can just look at this problem right now as a United States problem. I think you have to look at the fact that we were in a global post-pandemic economy and that the world was not working for people. But I don't think that the ownership needs to be on any one community alone. And the other thing that I would say to that is just trans people have always existed. They will always exist. It is our party's job to stand up for every single person, regardless of who you are in this country. We're supposed to be the party that fights for the least of these. And I always believe that's been our party's biggest opportunity going forward, is the ability to bring coalitions of people together, because we are that big tent party. And much as we want to fight with each other internally right now, our fight is not within, it is external. And the more people that we can bring to that conversation, the more folks that want to sit around that table with us, I want to have that conversation with every single person who decides right now that corporate greed and monopolies and the things that are existing right now in Washington, D.C. and in Raleigh, North Carolina, are not helping working people and rural people across North Carolina. Our opportunities, our economies are not getting better when Republicans are in charge of our economy right now. And we've seen that with this administration. And unfortunately, we're going to continue to see that with this administration. People are going to continue to get hurt. And it's our job to be there, to the point that our vice chair made earlier, to say we need to welcome them into the fold, and we do not need to be a party right now that says, I told you so. So.
The only other thing I wanted to add to what Anderson said is, please know that that is a strategy that they are using. Divide, sow doubt, point fingers, because at the end of the day, they thrive on trying to make people fear other people. And as soon as we let them be successful with one group, best believe the next group is right after that. And so what we have to do is stand strong and stand together and know that attacks on our trans friends mean attacks on women, attacks on Black people, people of color, young people, seniors. The whole tactic is to try and divide and conquer, and we can't let them do that. And so when we hear these narratives come up in the next election, we can't fall for it. And we have to know that that is exactly what they're hoping to do, that by pointing a finger at this group, that maybe we won't vote to support all of us, and that we won't support policies that support all of us. And we can't let them win on that.
I'll be very brief. What I want to add, first of all, thank you for your courage and for your speaking out. I agree 100% that candidates should know the facts and be ready to address that. And I would add to that you should hold people running for office accountable to what have they done what can they point to in their record that shows that they will stand up for you? Like lip service is good, but what have they actually done in the past? And so I applaud you for recognizing that candidates should be held accountable. Thank you.
Well, we got all these lovely questions and a lot of them, but some of them overlap. And so I'm going to just generally talk about 3 questions here. One without a signature is, Congressman Murphy, as a physician, you know how important Medicaid is, not only to the residents of rural communities, but to the survival of small rural hospitals. How can you vote for a budget bill that will strip these communities of vital health care? And there are 2 others sort of addressed to the representative. Why did you vote to cut Medicaid and Social Security? And someone who says, I've been on Medicaid until this year since birth, and it was hard enough, but I was born with scoliosis as well. I was only due to Medicaid that I was able to get corrective surgery to prevent permanent disability. Would you care to talk about the Medicaid issues?
What I can give y'all is the perspective too from the state level. You know, North Carolina for the last decade had a state legislature that refused to pass Medicaid expansion, even though the federal government was actually paying states to be able to take on more people and give healthcare access out. And I don't know about y'all, but I think the number one thing that actually Democrats, Republicans, and unaffiliated can agree on right now, the healthcare system's a little fucked up. Like the fact that you can't go to a doctor pretty easily and get the health care that you need and the access to it, that people have to worry about having to pay a hospital bill if you have it. And I give this to you the perspective of someone that does not have children. I'll be honest to you. I have a cat, though. And my cat, I know y'all are going to laugh at me here, but hear me out. My cat has asthma. And one day I came home and I found my cat laid across the kitchen floor. She couldn't breathe and she was having problems. And so I was sitting there and I had to take my cat to the emergency vet. And it was the first time I'd ever had to do that. And I was so scared that she was going to die. And I was like, this is the only thing that I'd ever felt the responsibility over in my life, that this was my sole thing to take care of. And I couldn't even do that in some ways, right? And so I was panicking, but I got her to the vet. And the vet looked at me and they said, sign this paper that says that you will be able to pay up to $1,000 for us to take this cat and to do something with it. And I sat there and I was like, I'm sorry, what? I don't have that much money in my savings account right now. Like, I don't know whether or not I'm going to be able to afford this bill at the end of it, but I'm sitting there giving you a lifeless thing that can't even breathe, that's sitting there in front of you, and you're not going to take it right now. And I, for a second, just sat there and I was like, oh my God, think about if this was a kid. You know, think about if this was your mom or somebody in your life that you I'll be honest with you, I could live without my cat, but I just sat there and I was like, I could not live without the people that have helped me live, right? And I think about every single person that's been forced in their life to make that decision when they step into a hospital room. And I'll be honest with y'all, our state legislature sat there for 10 years and said 600,000 people across this state should have to make that worry and that decision and feel that pain or that burden anytime because they didn't deserve the health care access that they should have been given. Our state legislature has been doing that. That's what Republicans wanted to do in North Carolina. And they finally, after a decade, decided to pass it because they finally realized that they would get more benefit, that our rural hospitals were suffering because we did not expand Medicaid for 10 years, that Martin County in eastern North Carolina lost its hospital because we did not expand Medicaid access in that 10 years. And we get to see what people in power choose to do with that power. They tend to hold it, and they tend to hurt people. And so it doesn't surprise me right now that we see at the federal government, the number one place that people in positions of power want to strip from are kids, right? They're people. The number one people that are on Medicare right now are children in this country, or Medicaid right now are children in this country. And I mean, we're sitting there saying we want to strip kids of health care access. That's what Congress is saying. And so I'm like, to anybody right now, I hope to God we don't keep voting for them, but I know that it's our job this year to get out and talk to people about what's it going to take for us to care about our neighbors again, for us to not want to lose access to health care again, because it's one of the most crippling things, and it's one of the things in our communities right now that I know that everybody has a story, can struggle with, and can understand. And if we want to get back to the issues that are going to impact across party lines, this is most definitely one of them. And so I don't know about y'all, but I I'm ready to get out in Craven County and talk to people about the loss of healthcare access, about the defunding of public schools, about what's happening in Congress right now, and help people be educated about you've got to also take action at a local level with us to get involved. Right? Y'all ready to get involved after this? I know I am. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm ready to go knock a door after hearing Justice Earls and Raina up here. Take it away, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Got a lot of questions here just generally about the Democratic Party. I'm going to try to organize them real quick. There are questions about how we can be competitive in presidential elections, since we haven't won in the state since 2008. What we can do to be more assertive as a party through signage, through advertising. What is it that we need to do to get people to run for office, that it's been difficult to recruit candidates for even the congressional race. Last year, that seat was uncontested. And then, what are some of the biggest challenges currently facing the Democratic Party in Eastern North Carolina? What strategies are being considered to overcome them? And what about the feelings of mistrust or disconnectedness that folks feel with the party? What can we in a small county party do to effectively combat this?
Yeah, there's some good questions. I could sit here and talk about them for an hour with y'all, I feel like, in that sense. My goodness. The number one thing I will say, though, I'm not going to lie to anybody, we did have problems last year getting people to run for Congress. It was one of the hardest races, I feel like, just across the state because we were under gerrymandered maps. Not a lot of people want to run for something that they know they're probably going to lose going into it. And that's exactly what Republicans expect. And I was so grateful to the folks that stepped up last year to run for gerrymandered state legislative races because it is a lot to put your name on a ballot and sit there and say, I know I'm going to go into this and potentially not be able to have the numbers in this district to win it. And I know that a lot of people don't understand gerrymandering, and I know that Justice Earls can talk a lot about this from her perspective on the bench about how the courts have weaponized this, but Eastern North Carolina used to be the backbone of the North Carolina Democratic Party. It used to be the place where you saw a majority of that representation come from, and Republicans in the legislature knew that. And so the second they got back into power in 2010, what did they decide to do? They decided to gerrymander Eastern North Carolina. They said, let's take away power, let's take away the base, let's take away the backbone. Because what people tend to forget is I'm like, folks think that when you say the words rural, you mean white. And I'm like, no, in North Carolina, rural is majority minority populations that have existed in the East and been our party's backbone. We have 18 majority minority counties that are rural in the state of North Carolina. North Carolina has the second highest rural population besides any other state in the country other than Texas. It matters what comes out of this region. Statewide races are won through areas like this. And so how do you make people feel disconnected from politics? You disconnect them from their local representatives. You make it harder for people to be able to understand, how do I get help from my state legislator? How do I get the constituency services that I need in my communities? How do I get access to resources that I know I'm supposed to have right now? Everything they're doing. Do you know this is the first time in 8 years in North Carolina that we will have consecutive maps, that your state house seats will stay the same because our courts have not been going back and forth deciding and taking each other through courts on what was part. And I hate to say it now, they're gerrymandered, but at least they're gerrymandered in the sense of that they stayed consecutively so that people can say, okay, this is my district though. I know that this is my district. A lot of people do not have the ties to that, and that has been intentionally built into our state. And a lot of what we have to do right now is the educational piece about what have Republicans been doing to North Carolina over the last 10 years, but also how do we take that power and fight back against it? And it has been through trying to build up local county parties. It's been trying through building up the opportunity for people to run for office and at the local level. I know it is hard to do so, and I know that we need to be able to get more resources to people that can. But the other thing that I would say is that North Carolina Democrats just went through a hell of a Supreme Court fight that cost us a lot of money, to be honest with y'all. And the thing that Republicans, I know, have done is that we went into 2024 with about $3 million cash on hand for the North Carolina Dems. Republicans, the NCGOP, was $72,000 in debt. And it mattered for statewide elections that North Carolina was able to do that, that Democrats had that. And a lot of this strategy for this Supreme Court fight to me was not just about taking us and making it the petri dish to be able to take to other states and say, we can deny elections for 6 months, we can use this in other places, but it was also to be able to say, we want to be able to bankrupt a state party. We want to be able to make Democrats weak. We want to be able to say, we're going to make you spend money on legal fights instead of on the ground where you actually need to be operating right now, and we know how to do that. And so our biggest mission is trying to make sure that we're coming back from that this year, that we're keeping staff on the ground, that we're keeping people motivated, but that also we help educate folks about what's happening. Everything they're doing is strategically to try to dismantle our opportunity to build back power because they know that we can. And that's the thing. Republicans know the only way to keep power in this state right now is to rig it for themselves. Genuinely. That's it. It's the only way they do it.
I'll just follow up on that real quick. So strategies, so I was a civil rights attorney for 30 years before coming on the bench, and thank you. So I litigated a lot of voting rights cases, and I saw this phenomenon of candidates just not even wanting to run when it's hopeless. And one of the most creative strategies that I saw last year was Kate Barr. Right? Kate Barr ran in a legislative district that was gerrymandered. The voting patterns showed that she couldn't win. So her platform was, Kate can't win. And she ran talking about gerrymandering and talking about how unfair it was and talking about what happens in states when they do have fair systems. So that might not be the issue, but I'm just saying let's use our creativity and let's put people forward, because I absolutely think that it matters to have someone running in every district to say there is an alternative.
So here is where I'm going to say this is an opportunity where everyone can take one for the team. Because this is what happens when we don't have Democrats running in every seat. People stay home. And if people stay home, then our statewide candidates don't necessarily have all the numbers that they need to win. And so sometimes what you've got to know is that even if you're in a very difficult district, even if you're in a very difficult place, you can give Democrats a reason to show up. And that might not help you immediately, but it's going to help all of us statewide. It's going to help all of us when people know that Democrats are coming out to vote. And so we've got to make sure that, as hard as it is, Anderson's going to do everything she can to give you the resources that you need if you decide to do it. But this is one of those instances where absolutely bringing people out and giving people a candidate to come out and vote for and not ceding that ground will make a difference. The other thing I will say, my late husband was a data and tech guru. He worked on candidate campaigns, progressive campaigns across the state. He really made it his life's mission. And one of the things that he talked a lot about right before he passed was that we've got to do a better job of learning how to talk to independent voters. Yes. And he was absolutely convinced that until Democrats and progressive people learned how to talk to independent voters, that we were not going to be able to win in certain areas. And I think that as a party, that's something that I'm thinking about. As I think about all of the horrible things that are happening right now, there is an opportunity for us to reach people who don't necessarily rock with us and tell them and show them through our actions and our commitments to our community and our love of country and community what it means to be a Democrat and what it means to care about your neighbor and what it means to care about your community. And this is an opportunity for us to reach, I think, some of those people who may not have thought about us before but care about democracy, care about making sure that the least of us has enough to survive and get by. And I think we can try and make some inroads with people in that way as well.
I have a couple of questions about various parts of the federal budget. I think it's federal. What can you do to reach the moderate Republicans who do not agree with the proposed budget? and there are several examples. There are 83,000 proposed cuts to VA personnel. Is there anything the Democrats can do to assure veterans continue to receive quality care? I want to know what's been done by our representatives to unfreeze the FEMA funds and restore the BRIC, B-R-I-C program, especially if it pertains to Western North Carolina. Why are we doing a $100 million parade on Trump's birthday? Why is he taking $400 million from Qatar on a taxpayer, you know, those kind of questions. So the budget, you know, what's going on there? Where to start?
Yeah, I was like, I think that the number one thing I can tell all of you, and it's something that Justice Earls honestly said earlier, you all are our best storytellers. The folks in this room right now, 90% of people are listening to local news more than they're listening to national news right now. It is important, I think, for each and every single one of you to go and have uncomfortable conversations. You cannot organize people that you do not love. And right now, a lot of people in our party, I think, are saying that we have got to distance ourselves from Republicans, that we can't talk to Republicans, that we're not willing to have those tough conversations. And I tell you all, we are not getting out of this unless we decide to have uncomfortable conversations, and we put ourselves in spaces where we may be the only person saying something, but we are talking to an audience of people that might be willing to give us 5 minutes of their time. Every single thing that you're willing to do, every connection, every community that you're willing to put us into. I know Justice Earls is willing to go. I know that Justice Riggs is willing to go. I know that our statewide candidates that ran last cycle that are now in the Council of State are willing to go. Mo Green is willing to get out there. Elaine Marshall loves to come and talk about rural economic development with anybody that'll let her and listen to her talk. And so the spaces that you all are in that we also can get into that you can help us have access to. Democrats have just, to the point that Vice Chair Morgan made earlier, we've got to show up and we've got to help educate people about this, because to be honest with y'all, not enough people have felt this administration just yet. They're going to. They're going to. And the sad thing is that has to happen in order for people potentially to want to come back to our party right now. But we have got to understand that we have an obligation to people in this country to meet them where they are. And I tell you all that too, because I think it's going to get harder before it gets better. And a lot of folks, again, if you're someone that's got stocks in the stock market, if you've got a 401k, you have felt this administration. You know, you've lost money in the last 3 months of this. Most Americans do not have stocks in the stock market or a 401k. I'm not going to lie to you. Specifically, young Americans do not right now. And a lot of our lives don't look any different than it did a couple of months ago. And so I tell you all that is to say it's going to, though. And it is going to be a place where we've got to consistently provide that education. And we also have to be educating ahead of time, because Donald Trump's campaign's already doing it, to be honest with y'all. They're already trying to blame Joe Biden for folks losing access to Medicaid and Medicare. I know. But that is we are in a war right now of messaging in every regard. But it is also to the point that I made earlier of that Democrats have got to also, and not even just Democrats, but this country, because, and I was talking to somebody earlier and they reminded me, they said, you know, this is not a battle of Republicans versus Democrats, and it's an idea about America and how you perceive and how you look at America and what you believe that America is supposed to be. And I think that we have got a lot of work to do as a party to be able to help people believe again in the vision of America that we all know is possible under an administration that cares about every single person across it and believes in the social safety net that's what made America what it is today. But I also know that we've got a lot of work to do. And I need each and every single one of you to sit out here and do it with us. And so I need you to step up and run for office this year. I need you to help us bring us into spaces this year that we may not have been in. I need you to help me be in places that we need to go to, the festivals, the community events. I need you to help this party show up, because that is where we need, and that's what we need all of you to do. And so I've got business cards up here. I'm going to be around afterwards. I want to make sure that I give that out to folks. I know that Justice Earls has been and will be able to travel across the state this year. She has genuinely been one of the best. And I'll be honest with y'all, the fun fact that I like to tell about this lovely lady right here is that she was on the short list to be on the United States Supreme Court. We have a living legend in our mix. And this is someone that we need to keep on our Supreme Court in every way, because our courts are better when we have someone that's willing to defend the people of North Carolina and stand up for them against it. And I just really appreciate her taking time to be here tonight with all of you, and our vice chair as well, for that sense.
I do want to say a word about money. And the question was about the federal budget, and it is really important what's happening in Washington. But I think it's also important to understand that some of the same strategies and tactics are happening with our state budget.
Yes.
And the legislature is right now debating the state budget. And one of the unique things I think that really troubles me is that our legislature is putting a lot of policy into the budget. But by that I mean they are putting provisions into the budget bill that actually aren't about spending money, but because when they put them into the budget bill, they can get them passed without talking about them, without shining a light on them. And so, but let me also say a word about money and education, because in 2022, your Supreme Court, at the time, again, 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans, said that if the legislature won't allocate sufficient funds to give every child in this state a sound basic education, then it's the role of the courts to enforce the state constitution, and we ordered that that money be spent. Then in January, the new court took over and immediately put a halt to that order. And so when I go to rural areas, teachers are asking me, when are we going to see the Leandro money? Leandro being the name of the lawsuit. When are we going to see the Leandro money? And I can't comment on the case because it's still pending, but I can give you the status of the case. And the status of the case is that a year after the court put a halt, they heard arguments in our court about an issue that had already been decided. And now as I stand before you 2 years later, over 2 years later, there's been no ruling from our court. So that Leandro money is still held up. So your courts also have an impact on budget and spending and your ability to have a good education system for our children. And so I ask you, as you're thinking about budget and monitoring what's going on, state and local levels matter as well.
Let's see. I've got a couple questions left in my hand, and your question was just answered. Diane had that question about Leandro, and and I'm getting a couple more. So we have maybe time for one or two more questions before our closing statements, and so I'm just going to do the best I can with these. Barbara Sampson, are you here? Yes. Would you like me to ask your question, or would you like to come to the microphone? Okay, great. Come on up. Thank you. Thank you. Yours was the only question like this, and I think it's such an interesting question that I want our panelists to listen to it and address it. There are a couple of other questions that sort of overlap with what we've talked about. I will, if we have any time, address that. There's one question that's very, very local to New Bern. I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards to sort of flesh that out. I don't know if our panelists can really handle that. But Barbara, here is your note card if you want to. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I was saying that okay. All right. Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Well, I've been looking in the news and everything, and I was noticing that President Trump, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, and some of the other millionaires and billionaires, they are taking over the social media. And if you'll notice that Elon Musk, right before the election, you remember he bought Twitter, but now it's called X. And you'll be surprised how many young people be up there making comments, but the only thing that he wants to come past is anything praising Trump. But I always make a comment, but after a while he take it down because if you're not praising Trump, he don't want to see it. Then I've been looking at the news, and I noticed that a lot of people, the chiefs and stuff from different news organizations are stepping down. I don't think that's the answer to it. I was hoping that they'll still stay on and call Trump bluff, even though it's hard. It seems like whatever he say, he's just like God. It goes. But we do have some pushback. And especially the newspaper we have in New Bern, that I don't patronize stuff, but I do read it. Because that's the only way you know where someone coming from is when you read what they have. Like the Compass. And all I see on the Compass is stuff building the Republicans up, but tearing everybody. It's not really tearing everybody else down, but they're getting all the negative sides of what's going on. And so, and what I was trying to say, what are we going to do to counterattack this stuff? He messing with CNN, he messing with any station that's trying to speak the truth, he's messing with them, and people are standing by. And, you know, not only the people, Supreme Court, they out of their hands tied. They scared to say something. But every now and then, when the people really cry out, that's when they make their move. So what are we going to do to counterattack this? We know we got to get the young people, because the young people's in TikTok. So we know we got to get TikTok going. You know, but seriously, you know, we got to do that, you know, because you can look around and how many young people you see. We got to start bringing them more to the table. You know, so, you know, just say, what do we need to do? Is we need to do something different, you know.
This is very difficult because everything you said is 100% on point in terms of what's happening. I do agree with you that I do wish that some folks would not obey in advance. There's a little book called On Tyranny, and it talks about how you deal with authoritarianism and governments, and the number one thing in that book is do not obey in advance. And unfortunately, I think we are seeing a lot of organizations and people doing just that. And so it's difficult. I will say this. There are some things that we can unfortunately take from the Republican playbook when it comes to communications and messaging. Non-traditional media spaces is an area that we really have to do more in terms of getting into, listening to, and supporting. There are a lot of podcasters, a lot of people who are in non-traditional spaces, but what we know is that that's where a lot of young people are getting their news from. People are not watching CNN anymore. I'm a very progressive person. I haven't watched MSNBC in about 10 years. And so when you have people who are leaving traditional media, you've got to find creative ways to reach people. We know that people are on their phones. We know they're on social media. We know that there are influencers out here doing the work. One of the things that the Republican Party did really well last cycle in terms of their communications and messaging was supporting influencers, supporting podcasts. And they were not, necessarily restrictive about which ones they were going to support. They were working with influencers who had podcasts or followings that were 10,000 people, less than 10,000 people. Because what they knew was that they did have a following and that people were listening to them. And they weren't on political podcasts. They were on dating podcasts or fitness podcasts. They were talking about, they were sending their messages in places where people were talking about everyday issues, everyday items, and then throwing in conservative rhetoric in the middle of those conversations. And unfortunately, what we saw was that it worked. It had an impact on people. And you've got all of these Trump bros who became Trump bros because they were listening to a podcast and their favorite podcaster, was talking about issues that they felt resonated with them. And unfortunately, I think we're about 3 to 5 years way too late and behind on where Republicans are. But it's not too late. And I think what we've got to do is really, make room for other people and other spaces and the spaces that they're in, recognizing that that's where most people are getting their information from. I'm not going to say traditional media is dead. It's not. But we have to understand that not everyone is getting their information from those sources, and we have got to adapt accordingly if we're going to be able to keep up.
The only other thing that I would add, I feel like I hear the conversation a lot of like, where are the young people? And the first answer I have, working. The second answer I have, having kids. The third answer I have is trying to exist and live in this world. Because I think a lot of people, when I look at folks and I ask, when did you get involved in politics? The number one answer that I get, when I retired, when I'm not working anymore, when I don't have a job or a family or a livelihood to take care of, I found myself to have the time to get involved. And so I do see some young faces in this audience, and I want to thank y'all for being here on a Monday night when you could have been anywhere else, quite frankly. and giving some of your time to this party, because I know that it is valuable right now while you are still trying to figure out how to make it in this world, and also, you know, what your political aspirations may be, or if like politics is the place that your energy is needed in. And I think that it is, and I want it to continue to be. And so I really want to encourage the young people in this space to hopefully come up afterwards too and help me understand how we can get more involved in Craven County and help more young people here. But I do think it is the outreach. Like, no one can tell me that they don't know a history teacher or an English teacher that knows somebody in a high school that's passionate about politics, that if they were given an opportunity to get involved at the local level, that they wouldn't. And I just think some of that ownership has got to be on us to be able to do that outreach and do that work, because it takes work to get people involved, and it takes organizing and people willing to do that type of work on the ground each and every place for our party. And so if you are willing to do that work with us, I really appreciate it. And again, would love to talk with you afterwards, because that is a huge piece of this.
Well, we do have a new Young Democrats organization here in Craven County. I see a couple of them here. But to answer your question, Barbara, also, I think that Linda Moore and I need to start a TikTok channel, and we'll learn the dances and all that. We'll be good. Now we're pretty much out of time for questions. I had a couple I couldn't get to. I apologize, but it's been a high demand on the questions, and great questions at that. We want to hear from each of our speakers, sort of some closing thoughts, and then Diane's going to give the closing remarks at the very end. So we'll have three panelists say what their final thoughts are after this evening, and Diane's going to close this out. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you for having us out here. This really means a lot to me as your vice chair, because as I said at the very beginning, we have to show up in places that we haven't before. And I've had so many, I had some really enlightening conversations before this started. I'm going to stick around so we can have some conversations after. But this is how we make change. When you have conversations with people and you really listen to what they're saying and listen to the questions that they have and really try to make a difference moving forward. So I'm going to leave with a little bit of not great news, but hopefully you'll be optimistic at the end. The not great news is that there is no knight in shining armor. There's no one coming to save us from this. There's not a pill that we can take to wake up from this nightmare. It's going to be a very hard 25, 26, 27, and 28. That's the bad news. But the good news is that we know that, and that we are not going to back down. And the good news is that you can make a difference. I tell people all the time that I did not start out aiming to be a voting rights advocate. The one thing I did was to try to help one person at a time and figure out how to do that in the best way that I knew how. And for me, that was organizing on my college campus. For me, that was working with the Democratic Party, working with colleagues and friends and organizers and activists in North Carolina. And eventually, you know, I got to a place where I felt like, as their vice chair, I can potentially make a difference. And you have to determine what that's going to look like for you. You have to determine how you're going to step up to the plate every day. You're going to have to determine what you can do to make a difference, because each and every one of you in here can. And you can bring 10 people with you when you do that. So as you are thinking about how these times are hard, think about how you can contribute to make it better. And when all of us do that, we will see a difference. We will win these elections. We will turn this from ruby, ruby red to periwinkle to eventually blue. All right.
I'm from Roxborough, North Carolina, so Person County. So I still live in rural North Carolina, and I always thought growing up there that I needed to get out, because I was told that, you know, you cannot stay when you're a young person. You're not able to stay in a rural part of the state and make something of yourself. And I was really lucky to find campaigns, honestly. I was really lucky to get involved with politics and to be able to go to college and to understand how to do that. And when I got back in my hometown, I became the county party chair of Person County, and I was so excited. There was about 8 people on my county convention call that I had. And, you know, Charles, who had done it before, not Charles Dudley, but a different Charles in that sense, right, had done it before me, and he was sitting there, and Tammy was on the call, and there were all these, like, Democrats in Person County that were like, well, I did it last year. I don't want to do it again. And, you know, you were the secretary last year, and maybe maybe we can shop it around, you know. And I came in as a young person, and I said, I would love to be the chair of the Democratic Party in Person County. And those folks looked at me and they said, girlfriend, take it, please. We do not want it any longer. And I got to come in, and I tell people that because I think that sometimes as young people, we believe it can be really hard to get involved in politics. And for me, it was as easy as saying, no, I'd like to step up and volunteer and do it. And that is also a very lucky situation that I found myself into with folks that were willing to pass the baton to me to give me the chance to step up. And what happened in 2021 when I took control of that county party was we got involved in city council elections for the first time in history of Person County. And everybody looked at me. I'd been there since I was in diapers, right? And folks looked at me and they said, Anderson, don't go bothering with city council. You know, city council don't bother nobody. You know, why do you want to bother them? And I said, because they don't bother nobody. And city councils are supposed to bother people. They're supposed to bother people with who's houseless right now, who's hungry right now, who needs help in your community right now. They're supposed to be shedding the spotlight on the folks in your area that need help. That is what we're supposed to be doing. And so that year, we ran 3 Democrats for the first time. The county party got involved, and, you know, they were nonpartisan races. And, you know, Roxborough, you know, I'm in an R+20 county, right? I didn't think that winning was the thing that I was supposed to be doing. Is put up a fight, right? I said, I don't want people just to get up there and not have somebody that's going against them to hold them accountable. And we ran 3 black Democrats for the first time in that city council election. And it was the first time the party had really gotten involved. We went out, we knocked doors, we made phone calls, we registered voters, we were out at all the festivals and the fairs, and we did the things. And we got so many people who had never also been involved in politics before because it was their friend that was running, it was their church member that was running, it was the person that worked at McDonald's that they knew in the line every single Saturday when they went to get their biscuit from, you know, that they knew. I mean, Shayna worked at McDonald's. That's why I'm telling that story. It was specifically, you know, and she was fantastic. She was a mom of 4. She was a working person, someone that didn't make $15 minimum wage yet in Person County. And somebody that when we put up those seats, folks said, man, I see myself in office for the first time. I see myself in government for the first time. And Roxborough flipped that city council from red to blue in 2021. And I tell y'all that because I think that it was the first time that I ever really sat there and said, oh my God, this happened in my backyard. This happened in a place that I really didn't expect it to, that I didn't think it was possible in my entire life growing up there. And it was just as easy as me putting my little finger on the pulse and getting involved. And how many other people, if they did that too, could we pull out to vote? Could we get engaged in politics? And all it takes is for somebody to just want to believe and will it to be possible. And I know that it's not as easy to do that in a place like New Bern and a place like Craven County. I get that every single county in my state right now is different. But I tell y'all that because honestly, you never know until we try. And I just, if you are considering running for office, if you're somebody that's thinking about it or saying, man, I don't know, or you know somebody good that would be, ask them to, encourage them to, tell them you'll host the first event at your house and bring some people into your backyard together to give them that little one-up and that chance because we need you to. We need you to step up this year. And that's my pitch to you all of saying, I need you to step up this year. And I'll be at your event out here in Craven County. We'll come back down. I know Raina's willing to travel. Just Earl's willing to travel. And can we give these ladies a big round of applause up here with me too? Because it is amazing to be able to have such phenomenal leaders of our party, and I'm so grateful to them as well. And again, we did have a problem getting folks to run for Congress last year. Greg Murphy did go unchallenged, and I need to give a very big shout out again to Chris Schultz, who's here tonight, who's stepping up to take on that challenge. Because we need Democrats to do that at every part of the ballot, and he also did it last year for us too for state legislative. So hey, and I'm gonna pass it over to Justice Earls now, everybody.
Wow. Well, I'm incredibly grateful to these amazing 2 leaders. I can't believe they made me follow them. But I do have good news. I want to close with good news, and that comes from my experience. I first ran as a first-time candidate statewide in 2018. So that was 2 years after you all remember what happened in 2016. And what we were able to do in this state, it was a blue moon election, meaning there was no U.S. Senate seat on the ballot. But there was there were 2 things that happened at least, and maybe 3. But one thing that happened was people not happy with the administration. So a lot of people turned out because of that. Second thing that happened was it was the first time that we had someone running in every state house and state senate district, which enormously helped me as a statewide candidate. I think the third thing that happened was I did run differently. Democrats have been nervous about their judges being partisan, and I said, I need to get out there and tell you what I stand for, what my record is, what I've done, and I think you saw Justice Riggs do the same thing. So those three things combined meant that we had higher turnout in that midterm than in prior midterms and in midterms since then. So if we could do it in 2018 with a blue moon election, we can do it in 2026, people. All right. So. So I really believe that we have the wind at our backs at this point. And it just takes us having the courage and the faith and the belief to work together. We have an amazing dynamic state party leader. We are going to have an incredible Senate candidate. Let me tell you who's running statewide for your appellate courts. So only one seat up on the state Supreme Court, so I'm running for that seat. For the Court of Appeals, we have Toby Hampson, who's running to keep his seat. He was a first-time candidate in 2018. John Arrowwood, the first, this is absolutely true, he is the first openly gay man to win a statewide seat in the South. Yeah. And he is running to keep his seat. He's won twice before. He's running to keep his seat on the Court of Appeals. The third seat will be, I told you the three Democrats are up. Allegra Collins is not running again, but today, Judge Christine Walczak, a district court judge in Wake County, has announced that she is running as a Democrat for that seat. Woo! So we are going to be working hard to get around the state. My website is earls4justice.com, earls4justice.com. I will definitely come back, but I'm on 7 social media channels. So, like me, share my posts. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, now X, LinkedIn, on TikTok, yes, and and Blue Sky. Blue Sky is number 7. And if I need to do more, I will. But my point is, get engaged with my campaign. I would love to have your help. And I firmly believe that it really is people like you in this room who are my hope for our democracy and our country's hope for our democracy. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your energy, your enthusiasm. I'm in rooms like this across the state. I'm telling you, I know we have the wind at our back because people are coming out in record numbers to say, we will not stand for what's happening, and we believe that standing together, we can change it. So thank you.
Thank you so very much. Diane's going to close us out this evening. Thank you.
All right. I think they saw my remarks beforehand and stole them all. If you're wondering what we're doing with your cards, I wanted to let you know that we are going to type them up afterwards. Thank you, Ryan. And we're going to send them to these chickens. Chickens don't lie. I'd like to thank each of you for coming out tonight to find out what you can do to defend democracy. No matter whether this is your first event or one of many, we all need to step up our efforts. The BBC and studies from Harvard tell us that how a small minority can change the world. They have documented that nonviolent protests are twice as likely to succeed as armed conflicts, and that those engaging a threshold of 3.5% of the population have never failed to bring about change. On April 5th, 5 million people participated in the hands-off nonviolent protests. That equals 1.4% of the population. We need to bring out 12.2 million people into the streets to total 3.5% and show that we mean business. So, if everyone brings 2 friends with them, we should make it. Start talking to your friends and neighbors, old and young, all political parties as well as apolitical party. Find those who have given up. Point out what we are losing to those who don't know. We need to do this as soon as possible and continue until the midterms and beyond. That is how we will change our world. Thanks again to the generous building use from the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. If you'd like to show your appreciation and haven't done so already, there is a donation jar on your way out. Safe travels and see you in the streets.